All right, everyone. I think we'll get started. It's a couple minutes after the hour, and I'm Greg Abel. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today entitled Race, Journalism, and Justice, a conversation with Black journalists. I'm Greg Abel. I'm CEO and founder of Abel Communications here in Baltimore. And this is the fifth webinar we've hosted since the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, and it's part of our series on communicating in a crisis. This webinar will be recorded, and anyone who registered to attend will be sent the recording later this week, and you can feel free to share that with colleagues and people in your network. So we've put together a great panel today, which will be led by our host, Nikki Mayo. Nikki is a multimedia journalist and current president of the Baltimore Association of Black Journalists, and she has worked in TV, radio, and print in several markets, and she's a graduate of Syracuse University. Hi, Nikki. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Nikki will be joined by Andrea McDaniels, who is the deputy editorial page editor at the Baltimore Sun. And in past roles at the Sun, she also covered business and health. Hi, Andrea. Thanks for being here. Brian Waters is here. He's a communications specialist at Johns Hopkins Medicine. And formerly he worked at ESPN and currently hosts two podcasts, including one called Breaking Through the Glass Ceiling. Hey, Brian.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. And we also have Sean Yos, editor with the Baltimore Afro, the longest running African-American family-owned newspaper in America, dating back to 1892. Sean, how are we doing? We can see Sean, but we're having trouble with his audio. So Sean, maybe try to log out and join us again and see how that works. Sometimes what I'll do too is try my phone with the app, which can just be a different interface. So let's hope we can figure this out. And we'll try that. And so I'm going to hand off to Nikki in just a second. A quick note on format. Our panel will talk for about 40 minutes. At about quarter of the hour, we'll turn it over to some Q&A. If you're in the webinar right now and you want to ask a question, please hover at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A button, and then you can just click on that and ask a question that we can get to later. And with that, let me turn over things to Nikki for our discussion. Thank you, Nikki.
All right, thank you, Greg. Please appreciate everyone for being here, and hopefully we'll get Sean back. We want to just jump into the news at hand and then build on that conversation. And hopefully by the time we get through two of you guys, Sean will be back and live in the living color. We've all been taxed and thrown into the Black Lives Matter stories for the past almost decade at this point, since about 2012. So let's just look at the most recent one that really seemed to have galvanized a lot of the conversation, which is the murder of George Floyd that we all saw, that 8-minute and 46-second video. How do your particular news organizations handle this? And I think that considering your different types of news organizations, this would be very interesting. Andrea with the Baltimore Sun, how did you all tackle the George Floyd video and how best to cover this incident?
Mm-hmm. I guess I would say we related it a lot to what happened with Freddie Gray 5 years ago. Baltimore had experienced, this before directly. We knew how it felt. It felt very personal, and I also think we had more experience in covering these types of issues. So we related it to that, and I guess with the protests, we were able to cover it from that angle as well. And we had experience covering protests, and these protests were different this time because our reporters weren't put in danger because these protests were more, calmer. And there also seemed to be more hope this time, whereas with Freddie Gray, it was like, what's going to happen when this is all over? Is there going to be change? But there seemed to be more hope this time in what was going on with George Floyd.
Okay.
More people seem to finally get it. It wasn't just, Black journalists. It wasn't just, Black people, that saw that, what we were going through. Everybody seemed to finally get, what a lot of African Americans have been saying for years, that this police brutality, had been happening.
Brian, how did you all handle it as far as, I guess, the medical standpoint from Hopkins?
Well, one, we I gotta give a shout out to our doctors that put out, we had quite a few of Black doctors out there who put out a great video, basically saying they could have been George Floyd, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, and the list went on and on. And it was really good to see that. They also had the, they were protesting. Forgive me for can't come up with the exact name of it, but they had a campaign where you had White Coats for Black Lives, I believe that's what it was called. And so it definitely made me proud. Some of the doctors I have worked with, just, helping with media requests. Dr. Sharita Golden, somebody who was on a BABJ panel, she was there and a part of that in the middle of it. So that was really good to see that. And then we also had a few of our researchers willing to help. Nikki, as you know, I have quite a few friends, that's journalists. So, one of our doctors, Dr. Panagis Galansatos, he was more than willing to speak directly with a few of my friends who have been tear gassed because they were covering the George Floyd murder. So we really saw a lot of allyship. I wasn't in Baltimore at the time during the Freddie Gray, so I couldn't speak on, I could tell you what it was like being in Connecticut, but I could say that with this one, I saw a lot of allyship as far as with George Floyd. Because to be honest with you, I'm still not okay. It's not over,
No, it's not. And we still have more names beyond George Floyd. We have Breonna Taylor. We have names that keep adding to the list. Speaking of adding to anything, we have Sean Yos, and I think we can hear you, right, Sean?
Yes. I hope so.
Yes, we can. I'm only smiling because Sean's here. But I guess going back onto a heavy topic, can you talk to me about how you and your colleagues at the Afro approached the George Floyd coverage? Something so gruesome as to see a lynching on camera, and how do you cover something like that?
Well, we have obviously a unique perspective given the fact that we've been chronicling Black lynchings since the early 1900s, really. So with that historical context, we always have in mind that we're one of the Black newspapers of record. And so our coverage was pretty comprehensive, not just as far as reporting was concerned, but as far as imagery was concerned, and making that link to the past and the fact that this is something that is ongoing for generations and centuries in this country. So, and tag back to Freddie Gray, one of the things that I've been reporting on is the fact that the George Floyd protest and the movement that we've seen as far as law enforcement reform is concerned, I don't think the velocity that we've seen as far as the movement is concerned, and people asking for what they're asking for would not be possible without what happened here in Baltimore in 2015, and specifically the actions of the state's attorney. When she charged those 6 officers, it opened the door a bit wider to allow for people to say, hey, we need to look at charging officers for murder, for misconduct, for corruption. And I think I don't think we should obscure that fact that without Freddie Gray, I think the momentum we've seen with George Floyd probably would not have been possible.
You mentioned something about the images that the world was able to see. I mean, we had the front seat because we were here in Baltimore trying to deal with this, but images of Black pain, Black trauma over and over, it almost became like a white noise of sorts where people just kind of tuned it out. There was something about being stuck at home with COVID-19 looming in quarantine life that forced the public, everyone, not just Black America, but forced everyone to pay attention and to look at that 8 minutes and 46-second video. You could not ignore it. Can you talk about when you see these images, though, you as a journalist charged with telling a story, but you're also a human, you happen to be a Black human, you're charged with also like filtering this and dealing with this. What was going on through your world? Start with Andrea, I guess. Yes, ladies first.
I mean, as a journalist, you're always taught to put, your personal beliefs aside because you have to, you have to do a job. But this did feel very personal. And as you said, the images made it even worse. I mean, journalists just died. And you think tonight back to the march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And a lot of what sparked change then was that people saw it on TV and they saw the brutality, and people who may not have been paying attention or it wasn't affecting them, so they didn't care as much, that made them pay attention. You can say that that's what happened now. People saw George Floyd die. They saw him crying for his mother. They saw him, saying he couldn't believe. And I mean, if that didn't make you feel bad, then, what type of person are you? And sorry, I'm talking my screen. And I think as a Black person, as a Black journalist, when you're writing about this stuff, you think, this could happen to my husband. This could happen to my son. You think about, my husband will come home late from work. Sometimes I automatically think, I hope he's okay. I'm not trying to check up on him, but I worry about whether he, he's going to get stopped by a cop and he says the wrong thing and something turns, something turns wrong. As a reporter, when you're covering this stuff, this is in the back of your head, but you also learn, that you can't let it interfere too much with your work. But at the same time, we need Black journalists at the table because we do experience this and we understand what happens. So we can bring that perspective to the writing. We can bring that perspective to the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Try, we don't win. We can try to make sure that our newsrooms don't ignore it or don't give it enough coverage.
Brian, jumping to you, because, at any given time, any of us can be stopped by law enforcement, but you've had incidents where you've been stopped by law enforcement and, you're blessed that you're here with us today. Can you talk to me about, seeing Black trauma and then also possibly having to experience it at the same time? How does that all come together and allow you to still tell stories?
It's difficult. One of the things, being on Twitter all the time, you see a lot of stuff that doesn't get as much coverage, but it's still frustrating. And at 23 years old, I was out with me and my cousins. It was Memorial Day weekend. We was all sitting outside, and thank God for that particular night. I just decided I didn't want to drink. We was out all day, and I was getting ready to get in my car to leave, and all of a sudden I hear the cops, and they jump and yell and get out of the car, and I got out of the car, and I'm not thinking, oh, you don't have the right to pull me over because I didn't do anything. I'm not guilty, so do what you got to do so I can go home. And, they were screaming, and I said, look, I just want to go to church. And so I'm going home so I can go to church. And, after I had to calm my nerves because I didn't want to just get in the car and leave. And, everybody, you saw the look of my family and friends, and the look was almost as if y'all decided to pull him over out of all of us. And then, a few years ago, I got pulled over for speeding, and I had my kids in the car, and I got my license and registration, and I just, something simple like, and it wasn't with attitude. And the cop said, "What did you say?" And I said, "Nothing, officer." And my 5-year-old, well, he was 4 at the time, 4-year-old son was right there, and my daughter was an infant, and my son saw all of this, and it was a lesson, but it could have ended if I had yelled back or said nothing or in the wrong way, who knows what would have happened. So when I see George Floyd and I saw the officer, it was painful because I thought about, like, that could have easily been me, I listened to his best friend, Steven Jackson. I'm a huge fan of the podcast, so I've always been listening to that. So when I first heard about it, I actually saw Steven Jackson's reaction post on Instagram where he said, "I got to deal with this. We ain't fitting to let this ride." And that was the thing, like just seeing like somebody shift from, somebody always joking to now turning into an activist to stop all this. Like I said, it was just frustrating just seeing all of these things happen. And I'm, like I said before, it's still in my mind because the officers are still essentially roaming free. They haven't to my knowledge, unless something's happened, haven't been sentenced. So that's another thing that's frustrating.
Oh my goodness. And Sean, thinking about the fact that the Black press has been there ever since Emmett Till and beyond. We've covered lynchings forever. Sadly, Black trauma, Black pain has almost been labeled fringe at times and to be expected, but not with the Afro. The Afro is always going to tell our stories from our POV. Can you tell me how between George Floyd, Freddie Gray, and all the other names on that list, how do you guys continue to, protect your mental while also covering this?
Really hard. When I had the radio show on WEAA, I remember like the weeks after the uprising, and one of my contributors to the show came in, and her husband came into the studio with her, and before we went on the air, he just hugged me because he said he could hear the pain in my voice over the air when he was listening on the radio, and he just hugged me and just smiled and just, and so it's really difficult to separate, especially when you're doing it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so when to go specifically to George Floyd, I heard about the video, and I think for 48 hours, I just refused to look at it.
Good.
And then when I finally looked at it, it continues to be more and more heartbreaking as I think about it, because it resonates with me that he was calling for his mother. But what really just tears at my soul is that he could do nothing about what was happening to him. He physically was unable to do anything except beg for mercy. And we saw the end.
We have a question from Professor Shipp, and I'm going to attempt to answer it as well as add to this conversation. She's asking about, was there any hesitancy to show the 8-minute and 46-second video itself, to show images of that officer with his knee on his neck? Was there any hesitancy to show these images? Speaking as a person that worked during peak Black Lives Matter for the Associated Press every night and weekend, wherein everyone was getting executed, and watching that content over and over and over again at the national level, I can tell you that my therapy bills went up big time. It got to the point where I could look at any video and I could tell you exactly who was just getting killed. Laquan McDonald, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, it'd be black and white dash cam video, security cam video. You hear the sounds, you'd see, bullets and shells popping off of the ground. And each time it was just to look around and to feel so isolated as I'm watching these lynchings on camera, because it's one thing to say, oh, they're a criminal, they deserve to die. But we seem to show levels of empathy for different people. And what I was starting to notice as a trend among those who were managing me was that people who, like me, there was little to no empathy for these people. Growing up in Baltimore, from Park Heights, watching the news stories constantly be, this person was killed in 1300 block of insert the name here. It just becomes very quick. You don't care about them. You don't see their faces but a mugshot. And it desensitizes people and also dehumanizes the victims. So when it comes to hesitancy and showing videos, sadly, it took the uprisings that we're seeing right now, which built off of the uprisings we saw in 2015 with Freddie Gray. It took that much for people to finally see our humanity. It literally took a pandemic to make you look at these videos, because I'm pretty sure the way I was looking at these videos, Joe Blow America, who decided that we're allowed to die if we had a $20 counterfeit bill or something, those people were not seeing the humanity in us. So I hope that answers Professor Shipp's question, because I don't think the Sun was running a loop of the video or anything like that. You might have ran the picture one or twice, but
yeah, I'm on the opinion side, so I wasn't involved in discussions of the video, so I couldn't tell you how that decision was made. But to answer your question about humanity, I can tell you that we have made a deliberate effort to profile the victims of shootings and homicides in the city. It's been a discussion for years, that there's so many homicides, and sometimes, maybe people become numb to them. you know, we write a brief on it and move on. But we have made an effort to like profile, you know, all Hamas victims and try to find out more about their lives so that, you know, they're just not another statistic and another number. A couple summers ago, we even did like a big web package where we featured the person's, you know, picture and, you know, and their story. So, I mean, we do have a deliberate effort in the newsroom so that they don't become just numbers. So I can't, we've worked on a lot of diversity efforts, you know, to try and improve coverage of the Black community. And that's been one of the things that we've done. When it comes to videos, a lot of times, I don't know, newspapers have this thing called the breakfast test. So sometimes, like I said, I wasn't involved in this decision, but a lot of times, you know, they'll use that, you know,
Yeah.
you eat your breakfast, you know, and watch this. So sometimes it's that, but.
Well, I'm glad you guys are doing
I know
that.
I'm sorry.
Real. I said, I'm glad you guys are doing that because the idea of like, will this pass the kitchen table test in the morning? You know, do you really want to show Gothic just in the name of selling papers or getting more clicks on your website? Like, are you really going to exploit Black trauma or just the trauma of humanity in general? Like, are you really going to show this much gruesomeness to try to get people's attention? Like, these are decisions that have to be made. Sean, I assume that for
No, can I say one more thing? One more thing
yes,
I wanted to say is also because I am on the opinion side now, I've only been on the opinion maybe a year and 3 months or something. I do feel like I can use more of a voice to write what I want about these issues. If that makes sense. I did write about his name's Ahmaud Arbery, the runner.
Ahmaud Arbery.
Right. Thank you, Ahmaud Arbery, and what happened to him. And I could, you know, express myself more than I could in a news story. So I think that's been.
Okay, and how does that impact like those who are kind of, I guess, reporting to you? Like now that you have that empowered voice, now that you can actually say, why don't we talk about this a little bit more beyond just the who, what, when, where, why, but let's identify the people, profile the people. Like, do your newer reporters get it?
Like I said, I'm on the opinion side, so I don't have reporters.
Sorry.
I do edit the columnist, so, you know, we can't have those discussions sometimes. And I edit op-ed writers, so when I'm editing op-eds, I can take that perspective too when editing those pieces. And take out inflammatory language, take out, you know, that type of thing.
Okay. How about you, Sean, when it comes to, you know, the coverage and making those decisions? How do you guys handle it?
Well, I mean, so my perspective is a little different, in the sense that, I mean, I do straight news and I do straight news, but I also have a column. So what I've done over the years is really delve into the personal lives or personal stories of certain murder victims over the years in the city. Like I wrote about Destiny Harrison last December. I've written about Corinne Gaines and Charmaine Wilson and you know, the Dawson family and other people, just to really give a strong glimpse into their humanity. And so that, I mean, that from my perspective, personally, that's how I have dealt with homicide. I mean, every week we list the number of homicides, you know, and it's just an ongoing narrative. I mean, we've been dealing with over 300 homicides a year since the uprising in 2015. So, you know, Erica Bridgewood says from Baltimore Ceasefire says, "Don't be numb, don't be numb." But every day it becomes more and more difficult not to be numb, not just for journalists, but for the people in the street, you know? So.
And Brian, just checking, like in the medical community in particular, there's always been a distrust between the African-American community and medicine, going back to how gynecology pretty much got its roots. It seems like that might be part of the struggle when it comes to approaching issues dealing with Black people and Black mortality. How do you guys, you know, pay attention to that, be intentional about that when it comes to getting information out there, knowing that there is an interesting history and not a good one when it comes to Black people in medical?
Yeah, that's a good question. Main thing is really just I don't want to use the word I don't use the word exploit, but I'll say showcase. Showcasing our doctors of color, you know, as Black or other nationalities, because their voice is strong, but they are in leadership, and you know, so and they are doing a lot of groundbreaking work. So you know, that's one of the things is just making sure we are showcasing them.
With Andrea, as you kind of talked about this, I'm curious, have you guys found yourselves covering more Black Lives Matter stories than you would probably been able to pitch before? Because people are now paying attention to it, sadly, because it's on trend now. Like, what's the nature of the story coverage, if anything has shifted?
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably naturally you're going to cover more because there's more protests. There's more people calling for change. There's more policymakers calling for legislative change. So I think that naturally, you know, you're going to end up covering more just because there's more going on with it, which I think is a good thing. It's sad that that's what it took, but it's also a good thing that we've reached this point. Hopefully, we'll start to see if any real change occurs, but that we've reached this point where people do want to talk about it.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, but naturally, I think you do end up covering more.
How about you, Sean?
What's the question?
The question is about Black Lives Matter coverage. Has it increased in your shop? Is it every day that this was already a Black Lives Matter thing? You know, how?
All right, that's all right. That's all right.
I mean,
That's
it feels
Afro.
like it.
Afro is we are Black lives. We're Black life in America. You know, that's been our mantra, obviously. But as far as the specific movement at this juncture, sure, I think so. We had an issue in July, a special issue called "We're Still Here," and we're gonna do the second part of that in August. We're still so I mean, our strength is in being able to report on these issues, these topical 2020 issues from a historical perspective, and that's what we do when we do these issues. When we cover the death of Elijah Cummings, I mean, it's a different, you know, obviously story, but when we take the historical perspective from a native son and plug it into his obvious importance in this time and space, it gives it a totally different perspective and totally different feel, and that's what we do with the Black Lives Matter movement.
And I have to commend the Afro on not taking, when you look at the Black press and how some coverage does normally roll in the Black press, typically it's more of like, let's cover the Black bougie organizations. And you don't see so much, I mean, let's be honest, you know, it's very boule. So see, very, very boule, you know, and to see that there's a right-on attitude to it, that you guys are not going to shy away from movements, from advocates, from those seeking policy changes, from the rigor that could cost sponsors some days. It's very impressive.
Well, I appreciate that, but let me say specifically, I'm born and raised in West Baltimore, like you, and I'm a Baltimore editor, and I take that real serious. So there's no way I can get away from the street. And I don't mean to sound, I'm not trying to sound hard, but I mean, that's my experience. That's where I come from. And so I would be doing a disservice to a lot of people if I got all creme de brulee or whatever that brulee. If I got creme brulee.
That is not
the people.
You know what it's called, Sean.
I know it's
Funny.
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, no, but it is very valid because let's be honest, we have to fight. I've been mainstream in Black press, and normally when I'm on mainstream news organizations, I have to like pretty much water down Black issues, Black events. If I say the phrase food, festivities, and fun, you know, yay, you know, like I have to make our whole existence into something that's palatable to our so-called mainstream, which equals pretty much our white audience, which really does not offer a lot of depth. It's kind of like, you know, Black light or diet Black or something. It's not like the whole Black experience being allowed to be explored. So I like the fact that we do have the Afro, that it does take that approach versus let's just, you know, it's okay to tout what's happening with the frats and sororities, but there's other stuff happening as well.
Can I add something?
Brian,
Can I add one thing?
yeah.
So one of the things, so I guess what's indicative that we are covering it more is that we are getting complaints from white readers who say we're covering it too much with all this Black Matter stuff. There was a writer today who said that we had too many Black authors on the op-ed page today. Why would you have 3 Black authors on the op-ed page? You know, but what if
Baltimore?
on the op-ed page? So I guess that, so to the point that, you know, when you're mainstream, you do get the critics that read it. That's not going to make us stop covering it because you cover all issues, but I guess that's indicative that we are covering it more because people don't like it.
And a lot of that was allowed to fly for so long that might be all that they know. And you're like, okay, well, we're trying to show you that there's actually other people who live in this world with you. And it's not in proximity to whiteness. It's more of a conversation of, these are citizens of Baltimore. These are citizens of Baltimore's issues.
Right.
We're covering those. And we're not covering them in proximity to, you know, to your white friend. Is in proximity to them.
We're covering the community. We're supposed to cover the whole community.
Like those people right there.
Right. But there's getting the trust of the Black community again that we haven't always covered well. And then the white community, when some in the white community don't want to read.
Well, the struggle is real. So, I mean, you guys are rebuilding a lot of relationships that are broken. And some places are not even trying to reestablish those relationships. Hopefully they'll see something like this dialogue and discussion and realize that they might be disturbing the greater Baltimore community if they're not paying attention to them outside of their proximity to their white friends. It just doesn't work well. We caught a lot of flack about a year ago because we spoke up on behalf of Black people as well as on behalf of just, you know, what's right and what's wrong. And it was rather interesting to see like the pushback be so much more like, you know, you Black women should shut up. Pretty much that's the title. And I took all the slings and arrows on that one because I care about my members too much to be throwing their names on stuff. But it's the idea of the way we want our Black people to be is the way they've always been. And it's kind of hard to push on them that, hey, you know, that whole scene out of Hairspray is kind of over now. And we're trying to like show that we can be progressive people here in Baltimore. And if you can't get with it, then you're just going to be labeled bigots and racists. That's just how it goes. You know, we're working with you, but dang, we're trying. Let's jump into just, we tackled a little bit about mental health. And there's a phrase, it was a sketch that I saw a while ago. It was called Calling Out Black. And to paraphrase it, it's pretty much when there's just so much happening, so much Black trauma, you're being inundated with the images of people killing us, state-sanctioned lynchings pretty much. Do you ever have these days where you're just like, you know what? I got PTO, maybe I need to call out Black?
I haven't.
Yeah, I have it too.
I guess, so I probably should, to be honest with you, because there are days where things just so heavy. And then, and I'll speak on it from like, it's almost like 3 different venues, right? There's seeing things happening to the victim, then explaining this to my kids and explaining to them why, you know, things happen to Black people, but being Black isn't something they should be ashamed of. Then there's, you know, the coverage, like we talked about earlier, seeing my friends out there on the front lines, you know, praying for their safety. So it's all of this, and, you know, especially the first week of June, the first 2 weeks of June was very stressful. That maybe I should have tried to, you know, call out Black, because it does take a toll on your mental health. You know, but it's hard because you want to put down your phone, but you want to be in the know. And we saw with those days, so many things were happening just over the course of time, you know, over the course of 12 hours, let alone 24. You know, Nikki, you and I are in a group chat, and sometimes, you know, even there, it can be helpful, but it's still so much going on that you're trying to keep up, and it's hard to.
I watch cartoons. I tap out. I watch cartoons. I do dance parties. I do whatever I can to escape this world. I have a great therapist. It sucks many days. And again, I was not lying to you guys when I said at AP, every night and weekend. Somebody's video is coming across, and my job is to clean it up. You know how many times you have to look at somebody get shot to clean it up? Not fun at all. So that's constant being bombarded with death. I can't even watch war movies, anything where somebody's getting shot. I think The Five Bloods just came out with Spike Lee, and that was too bloody for me. Like, I'm a kid from Park Heights, and I don't want to see this, okay? So the assumption that we are just automatically inclined and wired for trauma and bad things, you know, this is obviously a small rant. It really does disturb me. And when you brought the kids, you know how I feel about little people. I remember working with the kids over at Arlington Elementary on Rogers, and a car backfired and they all jumped on me. Like, they were scared out of their wits. So I don't know why people think we're supposed to just really be okay with seeing death over and over again. And then when we start to call out for our humanity, see, the journalists are trying to tell the stories, trying to give the mic and, you know, the words, allow the words to be seen for once. But those Black people who are not journalists are sitting out here yelling for their humanity to be respected, i.e. their lives to matter. And it is just in awe, the amount of pushback that you get as a journalist, like, well, how dare you tell the stories of these people's humanity? This is our normalcy now.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, right after George Floyd, I just felt heavy, and I couldn't figure out what it really, you know, what was really going on. I just felt heavy, and you know, it was after the pandemic. I couldn't get my exercise to deal with my mental health. You know, I missed being around people, and I didn't realize what I was feeling until another colleague at work was like, "Are you okay?" I'm not okay.
You're not okay. No,
no, I'm not. I was like, I'm glad you asked. You know, I wasn't really pinpointing that I wasn't okay. I just felt different. But you know, when you articulated, I was like, no, you're right. I'm not okay. And then by having that conversation with a colleague, it at least gave me an outlet and made me feel a little bit better. So sometimes, I don't know, you internalize it and don't even realize what you're feeling. But even having a discussion with somebody who's going through the same thing can help as well. I haven't called out. I kind of need something to do during the day now.
I call out Black.
Yeah, but a lot of my colleagues we're feeling the same thing. Just this like feeling of kind of doom, and is nothing ever going to change, and you know, here we go again, same old story. But yeah, and then writing is also an outlet, especially when I can write my opinions. That's also an outlet to kind of, you know, get those emotions out there too. That's another good thing.
So that way you're helping yourself cathartic, as well as also there might be somebody else sharing that experience.
Yes.
John, you ever have a day you want to call out Black?
Well, when you're working from home, it's hard to do, right? I mean,
Just turn the laptop off, you know, like.
You know, that's been one advantage of you know, the COVID situation, that you don't have to report to the office. You know what I mean? And you can pace yourself in a way that you allow yourself to take breaks, substantial breaks. You know, as you go through the writing process and story selection process and monitoring process. But it's you know. It's hard. I mean, I used to call out Black, I guess, but I typically don't. I mean, I just have that old work ethic that I watched my father have, so I just go to work, you know.
And I think when it comes to the whole calling out Black thing, a lot of the reasons why I asked about it is because it wasn't really dealing with seeing the trauma. It was the double trauma of being re-victimized by having your friends, your cool white friends, ask you, well, what do you think about it? Like, it's like coffee talk or, you know, a trending topic. So then you have to kind of like try to find a way to make it palatable to talk to them about it so that you can get out of this conversation in about 5 minutes. So that became part of the, like, this is part of my job now. My job is to tell, you know, news stories, but now I have to also explain systemic racism to you as well, which is, you know, no one pays you for that. There's no raise involved in that. Speaking of our jobs and race relations at work and everything, kind of shifting away from Black Lives Matter a little bit, can you guys talk to the impact, or I guess how your life might have been different from your white counterparts when it comes to being Black and being a professional journalist? You know, how has being Black impacted your road in this career? Anybody want to start?
Well, I can say I always feel like there's no room for mistakes. Like I always feel like I always have to perform, that maybe I'll be judged, you know, harder than maybe my white colleagues. You know, maybe it's not. But that's kind of what we're taught as Black people, that, you know, you always perform. You can't do what they do. You can't, you know, make those mistakes. You have, you know, you always have to do well. So I think, you know, there's always that pressure.
Okay. How about you, Sean? Like, I mean,
like she just said, Kim, no mistakes allowed. You know what I mean? Like the R. But no, that's real. When I worked in mainstream in television, I certainly felt that. You know, back when I was working in TV, there were like less than a handful of Black TV producers. So yeah, you had to hit home runs every morning, you know, because if you didn't, the self-imposed pressure was pretty substantial. But working in the Black press, obviously it's a totally different dynamic. But I still put that pressure on myself for my people, because I'm compelled to tell the story of my neighborhood, tell the story from my mom, you know, who was murdered in 2004. So I keep that pressure heavy on me, because I can't tap out on that. That's my in my DNA. You know, so so in some ways it's more pressure, because I really do feel compelled to represent for the street from West Baltimore, for West Baltimore, which has been disproportionately for generations impacted by not just violence, but oppression in Baltimore City. So, yeah.
I also feel responsible, like if the paper does something that I know that's, you know, good from the Black community, I always feel like responsible. You know, I'm part of this organization that just ran this, you know, story.
We had that moment, like, why did we do this?
No, and I can't control everything that happens at my job, but you feel that pressure as well, anxiety.
And Brian, you also had like time at ESPN as well as with Hopkins. How has being a Black man impacted that? I know it's a wide question.
So I think for me, my time at ESPN, the first year, or maybe probably first year, I felt the pressure of, you know, having to do well. After about 8 months in, I noticed that there were not a lot of Black CPs or coordinating producers, or even producers, or, you know, wasn't a lot of Blacks in senior leadership. However, there were a handful of Black PAs, and we tend to stick together. But you just notice things, and I noticed like a lot of people were leaving. So it was the struggle there was, you know, always, you know, kind of like you said, the self-imposed pressure, trying to do the best. And then I'm also coming from an HBCU, where, you know, I'm coming from Morgan State University, where most people are coming from North Carolina, Duke, etc. So there's the, you know, all right, well, is he here because of a quota? You know, but I will say that, you know, when I went to Johns Hopkins, the difference was that the particular team I'm on, I worked for minority managers for the majority of my time there. It was a benefit, because there were times when other teams didn't think that I was doing my job well or knew how to do something, and my managers spoke up. And then even the allies on my team spoke up for me. So the struggle in this space hasn't been what it was at ESPN. And that's been the best part, because, you know, now I've been trusted to make decisions, and, you know, my, you know, things that I can, you know, provide and add to, you know, the conversation or to the table, you know, it's trusted, where I didn't feel that way at ESPN. You know, it was like, oh, okay, he gave an idea, that's cool, whatever.
It's good to finally have a voice at the table. Mine is very short. I literally hit an entire degree for the first part of my entire career. So for the first decade, I wouldn't tell anybody I had an African American studies degree. And that's the only way I could kind of slide through the smaller markets of being an on-air reporter. I also fried the crap out of my hair and had a perm for like the longest time. I didn't go natural until I saw Andrew and I was like, I want my hair like hers. So here we are. but it's the truth. The natural hair situation is really dear and big with Black women. There's a lot of people wearing hair hats and wigs and units and stuff that they don't want to wear. And it's because some consultant said that that's the only look that will fly. And as we all know, those are very Eurocentric looks and not what grows out their hair, where their head. So we're happy. I'm very happy that, you know, we have progressed in 2020, but it's things like that. And I did work in Appalachia. So trust, again, I did hide a whole degree to make sure I could, like, you're talking Southwest Florida, Appalachia, and Western New York. Yeah, I had to come back to Baltimore and be on the list before anybody knew I had that other degree. And that's just how it is, because some people equated that with having, I guess, bad views on everyone else. Getting into one question before we start to wrap up, we had Jessica Fast from a public relations side. She just wanted to know how they can be intentional. She said, our agency has talked internally about how to counsel our clients and how to meet the moment, because, you know, you don't want to be tone deaf. But how can PR professionals be better collaborators with media and content creators? You know, what can they possibly do to not, you know, botch this one and pull out a Pepsi ad or something and make Pepsi end racism, like whatever gender that was?
I mean, one simple thing is to include diversity in your pitches. I was talking to somebody recently, a friend, about a school that closed in the area, and the students that they were presenting from the school that closed were all white, but when you go and look at the school, most of the students that attended the school were Black. So why wasn't that perspective, you know, presented in the pitch? So I guess a simple thing is to make sure that, you know, the pitches include diversity.
Any other suggestions at all, guys? How they can be a little bit more intentional about counseling their clients so that they don't totally botch it? I'm a big fan of, if you don't know what to do, just leave it alone for right now until you can figure it out. Maybe this might be the opportunity for you as the public relations professional to just tell them, I know best, let me help you out. And then you go and get somebody to help them out. Nobody wants a hollow, rings no heart, no soul attempt. It just always backfires. So get help, talk to somebody who's diversity and inclusion, like that's their shtick. That might help guide it better than allowing the regular heads that never gave a crap about Black people in the first place. You really don't want to have them wing it on this one. It's just not, that's not something you want to clean up. You know, ask the folks over at Atlas. They've been trying to fix that situation for a minute. And it keeps getting worse. Another question we have, by the way, is that I'm not sure if this really falls on us, but is there any programming being prepared to help the youth deal with the violence and their feelings? From the media standpoint, I don't know, Sally, but, you know, stick with ABLE. They've been doing a lot of crisis communications calls and meetings like this, so you never know. They might have one in their in the works, excuse me. And another one is about the escalating homicides among Black people in Baltimore. I guess we're gonna do Black on Black crime now. When we want to bring a sense of urgency about this, how do we convey that notion that all Black lives matter without playing into the hands of folks who are opposed to Black Lives Matter? How do we shed more light on Black folks killing Black folks? I wanna jump on that before I let y'all talk about that. I do, I love professorship, I really do, but I do always get offended whenever Black on Black crime comes into the conversation about Black Lives Matter. We are allowed to do, you know, the whole walk and chew gum at the same time. And real talk, Black Lives Matter comes from pretty much us being assaulted by law enforcement officers, meaning we're talking about the officer-friendly campaigns. As a person who seriously sang on the Baltimore Police Youth Choir, the whole thing was done to make us comfortable with cops as kids. I don't know where it is now, but you get the idea. Like the idea that you can entrust law enforcement is always ingrained in us as children. So that's what Black Lives Matter is more about. We have advocates in the streets He mentioned Erica earlier with the ceasefire campaign. You have advocates that have always working for this. So I don't want to act like that is not happening. That's my response. Anybody else got anything?
Well, I could say that I had on my wrestling talk show, we had a panel discussion about race, and we brought up the black on black crime, as they say. And one of the things that one of my friends said is generally when there's black on black crime, somebody goes to jail, and so it might not always be the right person, but somebody will go to jail. Our issue for with the law enforcement is it's very rare that somebody goes to jail. And, we've seen, Michael Brown, even though he wasn't in law enforcement, Trayvon Martin, with George Zimmerman. So when we see these people get off, that's our issue. It's not so much that we don't care about black on black crime. There's still, and then you do have people out there marching. And I hate the fact that it's a lot of times that people forget about when the black men are marching against gun violence, the ceasefire campaigns. A lot of people, that's against, black on black crime. So that's the thing people forget. There are people out marching for that.
Like the work is being done.
Huh?
The work is being done.
The work is being
Let's
done.
not forget that the work is already being done, has been done, continues to be done. I don't want to mess up anybody's name, but I mean, there's this one sister that's out there every 2 weeks doing the same thing for her brother. Is it Tyrone Brown, I think? I might be wrong, I apologize. But you get the idea, like the work is being done. Let's not forget that. And we are allowed to, I mean, frankly, I don't have any activity in open air narcotics. I stand a bigger chance of being assaulted by a cop. You see, I got pulled over in Hartford County for nothing. Like, I have sadly a bigger chance of that happening to me than me being a victim of black on black crime. So more people are seeing themselves as a possibility in this horrible chaos that we're dealing with right now.
I just think it's two separate issues. And when people try to switch it to black on black crime, they're just trying to deflect from what the issue is at hand.
Gotcha. All right. Let's see. How do you feel about? Sure. We got one last one, and it's from Maria. And her question is about how can agencies, let me read this again, I apologize.
Nikki, I'm going to interject for just a second. I think Maria wanted to share a thought in answering the question that Jessica had posed about how agencies can do a better job being inclusive. And so, Maria, if you would like to share your thought, we have just a minute, but if you want to just share what you'd like to say, I'm going to unmute you right now. Go ahead, Maria.
Hi, yes, I included it in the chat, but basically, yes, I was answering Jessica's question. One of the ways that really can make a change and make a difference is to have a diversified staff, to have a diversified team, to have people who have a seat at the table, which is what we are not seeing here in Baltimore. I served on our board, Baltimore Association of Black Journalists, as the media relations rep. And most of our colleagues who are in media related positions, corporate communications, public relations, they are working for either government agencies or nonprofits. There are many small agencies, PR agencies, corporate comms agencies, as well as a lot of regional headquarters and regional offices in this area. And we simply aren't seeing our people getting those positions. They're not getting that foot in the door, and they're not getting a seat at the table. That is the best way that you can assist in diversifying and making sure that the content that you're producing and the work that your clients are doing is truly representative.
Maria, thank you so much. Very important comment, and appreciate you chiming in. Nikki, we are getting about to the hour here, and I want to try to go on time. Before I just wrap it, I wanted to give any of our panelists and you, Nikki, the opportunity to promote any of the work you're doing or just share where you can be found online. Why don't we do that real quick, and then I can add some closing comments and wrap it up.
Okay, let's start with Andrea, ladies first.
You want my
Are you
contact?
working on anything, or how can people keep in contact with you and look at your work?
I mean, I write about a variety of issues, and I'm always looking for op-eds. I edit the op-ed page. I set what op-eds run, so I'm always looking for op-eds from different perspectives. So please feel free to send me your submissions. I can't run everything, but I try to run as many as I can. You can send op-eds to commentary@baltsun.com, or you can email me directly at amcdaniels with an S on the end, because people always forget my S, at baltsun.com as well.
Okay. And Brian.
Yeah, you can follow me at Brian H. Waters on Twitter. Also follow Hopkins Med News on Twitter as well. I produce a segment called In Case You Missed It, where we recap. Right now it's all COVID stuff. So all the COVID tip sheet, which we just had a new one come out today, you can find on hopkinsmedicine.org/newsroom. So that's where you can find our content.
Okay. And Sean?
Yeah, you can check me at afro.com, my race and politics column every week. That's the best way to catch up with me right now, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And for anything you need from me, I'm always working on another project, and I come on TV1 like every Monday. But I'm Nikki Mayo News across the board, website and every social media handle. And that's all I really have. I think we've had an amazing time with you all. And I'm going to hand it back over to Greg to say goodbye.
Thank you, Nikki. Great job. It's a pleasure to have you and the panel. Thank you so much for lending your time and insights. I enjoyed listening to you, and for everyone, we'll send around a recording, and we'll include the links to the panel's work that you can find. And then I just want to mention very briefly that our next webinar in our series will take place in August in partnership with NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. We will discuss the heightened impact that coronavirus and racial injustice has had on mental health in the workplace, a topic that we touched on today. Our host, Carrie Graves, who is Executive Director of NAMI Metro Baltimore, will discuss what types of resources you can offer to employees and how leaders and managers can look for signs of distress and talk to coworkers in this moment. So I want to thank everyone, and with that, we'll say good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.